Hey everyone, this is David Bennett with Chess on the Brain, and I'm here to analyze our second game. This is from Edward Xiao. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Xiao. I think it's Edward Xiao. And here's the email he wrote to me. So he said, "Hey, I have a game for analysis on your YouTube channel. My name is Edward Xiao, and I'm 14 years old. I live in Maryland and frequently play in Maryland Chess Association tournaments." Let me just make sure we're good. Yeah. And he says, I began this year as an 1100 USCF player, which is like a high beginner, I guess I'd say, but have climbed to 1800 USCF, which is moving into the advanced level, after playing in the Cherry Blossom Classic this past Memorial Day. After watching a lot of GM Simon Williams's YouTube videos and his DVDs, and I'd really recommend Simon Williams. I actually played some variations of his Dragadorf, where he talks about spicy chess openings. So I like some of his variations on the dragon that he worked on with one of his students. Definitely recommend it. And I can confidently say that I am an attacking player, having learned the French defense, Dutch defense, and IQP or isolated queen pawn positions, which is where you just have one pawn on either d4 if you're white or d4 if you're black. And he said as white. I have goals to get the USCF, US Chess Federation, candidates master title, and eventually the national master title. And I understand that candidate master, I think that's with 2,000, basically an expert, and national master title is 2,200. I learned about you on chess.com after reading your blog on how you got the national master title, and I immediately started reading more and more of your blogs, going through your chess journey. And I mentioned in my previous YouTube video, I mentioned that blog, which was useful for a lot of people. So feel free to check that out on El Tenedor, E-L Tenedor, T-E-N-E-D-O-R, or David Bennett's chess blog. And in the previously mentioned Cherry Blossom Classic, I scored 6 out of 7 in the under 1900 section with 5 wins and 2 draws. That's impressive. That's really good. So he goes undefeated, 5 wins and 2 draws. Having beaten a few 1800 players, my rating grew from 1654 to 1833. Wow. So almost a 200-point gain in one tournament. I don't know how many games he's played, but if he hasn't played too many games, I think they call it the K factor, basically the sensitivity of how much your rating can go up or down each game would increase more if he hasn't played as many games. But yeah, it sounds like also just the fact that I think there's just the fact that he beats so many stronger players that really works in his favor. So almost 200-point gain. I would like it if you can analyze one of my games from that tournament, which I played against an 1800 player, which is entering the A class. A class and then expert is 2000. I felt that I was losing immediately out of the opening, which was a closed Sicilian, but I managed to complicate the position and win as white. After briefly looking at it with the computer, I concluded that I indeed was lost out of the opening, but the craziness of the position saved me, and he definitely did well in that scramble that arose, which we'll get into. If you could analyze this game, I'll be very grateful. Sincerely, Edward Xiao. So let's take a look at that. It sounds like what he really wants out of this, from what I understand from the email, is to understand the closed Sicilian a little bit better. So that's pretty much going to be my focus. And I think this would be a good opportunity for me to show you how I like to use the internet to understand openings. Now again, not just looking at the moves, but as I mentioned previously, really getting into the ideas behind the openings, and I get that by looking at grandmaster games. So for example, on 365chess.com, I looked up the Closed Sicilian, and I found a bunch of Spassky games. I'm like, cool, we can, he was the world champion, one of the greatest chess players of all time that Bobby Fischer had to overcome in 1972. So I'll get into that in a minute in terms of how I go on this site, which I recommend mostly because of this frequency. So you see recent games, top games by average ELO or rating. That's the system that Hungarian, I think, mathematician with the last name ELO came up with that system for determining ratings, and it became something that was used in other sports as well, other games. And frequently played by. So there we go. Most frequent player of the Closed Sicilian, and the variation that I popped in is Boris Spassky with 46 games. So that's a treasure trove right there. We found a gold mine. So we could just click on his games, and when I did that, I saw that there were 3 in a row that he won. So I said, hey, he must have been doing pretty well. He won against, I think it was 3 grandmasters. Overall, he does pretty well with it. A lot of draws. Actually a few losses here too. This was in the 90s. Well, okay, that's when he wasn't as strong. That wasn't his peak. He drew a lot in the 80s, but really his peak had to be, he was world champion in the 60s, I think, late 60s or at least early 70s. when Fischer beat him several years that he had the title, then that's when he was doing better with it, I think. Let's see, we have 79. Is there another page? I think that's it. So it looks like the first recorded game is 1979, with this opening in particular that I put in from this position, which is similar to the game that we're about to look at. He had this G3 line and against the Closed Sicilian as white, and to figure out how do you play the system. It's the kind of thing where you can really come up with a structure you're familiar with as white, and you can play that all the time. Anyone who plays the Sicilian, you can, for the most part, get a position you're going to be familiar with, which I definitely recommend. And when I played the English a lot, I'll still play it sometimes. That was something that really helped me. Having a system, mastering the system, and every time you play in a tournament or you play online, you analyze your game, and you can look up the openings, whether you use ChessBase if you want to be a little more sophisticated about it, or I think these are just fine. You can look at a lot of great grandmaster games on 365chess.com. Leechess.org has it built in, actually, if you click on that button, Opening Explorer and Database. And let's see. Okay, we're good. And I messed up my recording the first time, so I have to make sure I got this down. So yeah, I definitely recommend doing this and getting the idea behind the Grandmaster games. So G3, and we have, I think it was 3 wins in a row. There we go. That was in 1987 and 88. World Cup, Wellington, and the New York Open. So yeah, I just looked at the first one so far. Oh, and he beat Edward Xiao, who's a very strong player. And I think I've seen Jan Hotterson. So he beat all 3 of those strong players, 2500s, 2485, and Gufeld's been stronger than that, I think. So we'll look at those Spassky games and a few others I came up with, looking on Lead Chess and chess.com. So we'll get into that. First of all, let's look at Edward's game, at least the opening, and then we'll get into the Grandmaster games to learn from those as well. So Edward starts E4, and let's see, who is his opponent? His opponent is William Odom. So he's, at this time, now he's like 200 points higher. At this time, he was a 1654, and William Odom is an 1828, playing with the black pieces. So he's playing as an A player, strong player, probably going to be an expert soon. And so after E4, King's Pawn opening, C5, that defines the Sicilian defense. Knight C3. So this is usually the introduction to the Closed Sicilian. If you want to play the Open Sicilian, you'll generally you'll play Knight F3. And then after Knight C6 or D6, I think that's the most common, then you can hit him with D4 right away. And that's going to open the game. So white loses some of his center here, but you can still see there's nice centralizations. There's 1 central pawn for white versus 2 for black, but black's position tends to be more compact until he gets those pawns rolling. Then maybe black can take over the position. But for now, white's going to have some initiatives. That's the Open Sicilian, which is the most popular. But the Closed Sicilian has been played by a lot of strong masters, grandmasters, and that's another thing. I mean, we can learn from grandmaster games. We also want to see sometimes what's practical for maybe not a grandmaster, but a 2000, a 2200. Always try and see what someone who's stronger than you, what they're using successfully. So sometimes you'll just find a player you like. Like I mentioned, I really like Tiviaco for the Dragon. So I think he's originally from Russia and now living in Holland. I think he may be living in Holland now, in the Netherlands. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But Tiviaco with the Dragon is awesome. So I found him through 365chess.com. And yeah, just find a player that you like. So for example, with the Closed Sicilian, maybe it's Boris Spassky. There's probably a specialist in the Closed Sicilian that maybe you can mention if you found him or her, and we can learn from that. So Knight C3, E6. This is annoying. I think it's pretty annoying to see this as white, because the second E6 happens, black is ready to strike back in the center with D5. Might even transpose to some kind of French defense setup for black, but without necessarily getting your pawn on d4 like you want in the French. So it could be very annoying. You could really have your center blown apart after d5 if you're playing with white, and black could equalize very quickly. So we have to play accurately here, because usually, or a lot of times, you'll see stuff like, say, knight c6. I've played that as black, for example. I'm very used to playing the English, so I basically play it reversed with black. I started with the Sicilian, actually, and then I was so comfortable with the Sicilian that I figured, hey, let's just play the English with an extra tempo, an extra move with the white pieces. So I'm pretty familiar with these positions. Whereas the last game that I analyzed, the Roy Lopez, I'm familiar with it because I've studied so many Roy Lopez games. But they just come up. It's a classic opening. Whereas with the Sicilian, I've played so many games like this. I mean, this is what I played growing up. I learned all the lines. When I took my gap year, I had some nice wins that in the database. I beat a couple of strong 2300s, around 2400 FIDE players. Those were some of my best wins at that time that I was happy about. Using the dragon, it was using that line where you castle queenside is black, and then you play d5, and then white allows you to play d5. Usually they want to bring their bishop to c4, but a lot of times in the dragon or in the Sicilian systems, if black can get that d5 moving, they can equalize. So maybe at some point I'll go over those games. Those were a lot of fun. But yeah, I definitely have a lot of experience in these types of structures. So hopefully I can give you some insights about it that you can apply across your games. And there's actually a game, I think I mentioned, there was a Gufeld game that we came across. And Gufeld has a book. It might be sitting around somewhere. Is it right there? There it is. Yeah, one second. Secrets of the Sicilian Dragon right here. So that's Edward Gufeld and Eric Schiller. Really good book. It's about these patterns, these patterns that come up again and again. So whether you know the English or the dragon, these types of structures, you can apply it across. So after knight c6, yeah, this is a little more typical. You'll see this kind of thing a lot in the Closed Sicilian. And then a lot of times white will do g3. This typical set, maybe d3 first, kind of defines the structure for the Closed Sicilian. And then black can go g6, and often white will go g3. And both sides will start quietly. No one's going for an immediate crush. We're just doing a slow build-up, semi-closed position, not totally locked up, but our pawns haven't met yet in the middle. And notice that the bishop on g2 in these types of structures is helping along with the knight and the pawn to control the d5 square. So you can see that white really has that domination on the light square, similar to the Roy Lopez as we looked at last time. And black clearly, in this case, is also controlling the dark squares, in particular the d4 square and the e5 square. The knight might hop in here at some point, or here. But the point is we're just taking a stake in the center. Both sides are really fighting for that center. So that's a little more typical. But now e6, so I can't say that I'm the most familiar in terms of what to do with e6, because I don't really play this structure with black, and I don't play e4 with white. Although what I have done with black is played g6, knight c6, bishop g7, and then doing e6 and knight ge7. So it could transpose to this same setup. And this is super flexible. I've seen a lot of grandmasters play like this. You don't even have to do anything too ambitious as black. You can just do something like that, d6, b6, bishop b7, and I've won a lot of games in that type of setup because it's so flexible. And when they least expect it, you strike back. Or hey, who knows? Maybe all of a sudden you play e5 and f5, and then you're going for a kingside attack. Or you can play for later on you go a6 and b5. I've played that with the English as well. So again, it's pretty much the same idea. You either play the Closed Sicilian with black, or you play the English with white c4, and they play e5. But it's generally, yeah, it's even better, of course, if you're playing on the white side with that extra move. Get a little more pressure on them that way. So after e6, knight ge2. Now this is an interesting move. It's flexible. And of course, if you're going to go g3 and bishop g2, then it seems to make sense to have the knight there. Actually, I was looking at this with a student once. He really liked the Closed Sicilian. And playing this structure with bishop g2, and then f4 seems to do well with knight f3. So you don't have to go to e2, because the thing is this knight might want to tuck back to e2 himself. Whereas if this knight, it's a lot of arrows, if this knight goes to e2, this guy is not going to be able to come back. Maybe after, this is typical, d3, bishop e3, queen d2, and then the knight can tuck back to d1, and maybe if after f4, he can reroute to the king side after knight f2, for example, and then you can imagine him hopping into g4, nasty stuff coming here on the f6 square. Actually, in one of the Spassky games, one of them that I looked at, the first one I looked at was the Spassky game, and he did that, which is pretty cool. We'll get into that. So let's watch how it actually unfolds. So after e6, knight ge2, knight c6. Now, another thing I should say, well, and now I have it on leadchess.org, and it's doing this analysis through the open source software Stockfish. And Stockfish wants to play d4. You see that arrow? That seems to be its the intuitive move, or if you can use intuitive for a computer. But that seems to be its choice to play d4. It wants a more tactical situation. It wants to put immediate pressure on black. Again, this might lead to some of the more common lines with the open Sicilian. The transposes after takes, knight takes. So the knight e2 move is flexible, and maybe white is just playing a trick, or pretending to do something different. But maybe white simply wants to transpose to a main line. And it seems to me like, again, I'm not an expert in this. Maybe someone who knows the Closed Sicilian really well could give a comment. But it seems to me that against e6, maybe it is white's best bet to go with d4, either now or very, very soon. Maybe you can do it with g3. That's interesting. I think I actually saw a game on chess.com. It was analyzed on a video on chess.com with the bishop g2 idea. And again, it's a very solid setup, more positional. But I'll get into that later. That you're leaving the c4 square alone when you go. That every nuance matters. So I'll get into that in a little bit because the black knight would like to go here or here, and get to c4 a lot of times. So you got to watch out for that square as white. That's one of the most dangerous things about the open Sicilian setups. But I do think that this might be good because when I was looking into it, I was saying, hey, black is doing really well in these lines with e6. So maybe, as I said, unless you did, also this is good too. This is good too. But just the straightforward e6, maybe d5, maybe just d6. But black does well. So I said, okay, maybe we just leave the closed structure and enter the main lines after d4. Or maybe black is committed to something else. This might become a weakness. But so that pressure on the d file that we're going to get, it could be good. Sometimes you get knight b5 coming into d6 after you open that up. Oops, opening up the d file. So it seems to me, based on my analysis, that you might want to try d4 if they play e6 against this structure. But g3 is flexible. This is a positional way to handle the opening. It's almost like you're playing a King's Indian attack. It could be a King's Indian attack. Usually with the King's Indian attack, I see the knight coming to f3 instead of e2. But one of the benefits, though, is that you get a quick f4 in. So it's very flexible. With the bishop here, the pawn could push to f4 after castling, and you might get a quick attack. You might push this, it might support e5, similar to the game. So positional handling of this opening. But as I talked about in the Roy Lopez last time, that is a weakness. So you do have to be careful. Sometimes that can be relevant. I mean, the bishop's going to cover it, but you can just imagine a knight coming in. Some pieces might want to look at this. If things open up, if that bishop gets to g4, you just have to be careful. Every pawn move is a potential weakness. Those squares that the pawn used to defend, like f3. So I like to talk about pawn structure a lot because it's important. I really think that's going to be a differentiator. That's something that will help you really move up to the 1800 expert level, and then the more nuanced understanding you have of the pawn structure, the farther up you'll move in the chain, in the chess hierarchy, I guess. So, which you might have issues with that, but it's in terms of competitive chess, you might be a grandmaster strength player, but when it comes down to it, the ratings are really just based on performance at the end of the day, in addition to your knowledge. You got to apply it over the board under pressure. So g3, b6. This is interesting. Actually, a lot of players seem, when I was looking at the opening book, and now again on leadchess.org, I just did this for the first time on this site today, where I pressed this button. That's where I got some of this analysis on the side, pressing the opening explorer. And there it is right there. And you see a game that was a draw. Gray stands for draw. I think black is black wins, white is white wins, and gray is for draw. So this was between a 2385 and a 2320. Westerinen, Heike. So they drew against a player approximately slightly lower rating, but approximately the same strength. So bishop g2. So this has been played before. Okay. How do we get rid of it? Okay, we click that again. So b6, and yeah, all the moves that Edward played are consistent with what masters have been playing. Bishop b7. It's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. The bishop is basically saying, hey, I'm going to vie for control of that diagonal. I'm not going to let you just have it, because you might want to go, again, that idea, maybe f4, maybe e5, and just tear open the diagonal, which is actually what Edward did in the game, but it was a bit premature. It didn't quite work out the way he did it. But the e5, and there's another game, again, that I was looking at that I can show you where e5 actually works. So you have to time it right. But you don't have to always play e5. You can just keep this solid structure with d3, and usually f4 comes. And you just have this kind of nice house. Sort of have this house. I like whether you're on with e4 and f4, or with d4 and c4. That was one of my, first I played the King's Gambit when I was first doing tournament chess. But online, when I first started playing online, I liked that structure a lot, because it's super solid, and it's hard to crack, and yet it's dynamic too. You can tear open lines, but your bishop can go to b2. So those are very interesting structures. In this case, it's just a little more aggressive because you're on the king side. So assuming black castles king side, which is the most common thing that happens, you're kind of poised for attack in these positions. So white castles quickly, wise idea. Again, those 3 opening objectives that you want to do. And I'll mention things that, it might be useful for beginner players, and it might be a little bit redundant for more advanced players, but I'm going to try and get everybody so everyone can benefit. So if you barely know anything about chess, hopefully you can still watch this and get something out of it. And if you're approaching expert level, master level, hopefully you'll still learn something too. So castling, so the 3 things you want to do are control the center. Try and get those 2 pawns in the center. We call it a pawn center if you can get those 2 pawns there. So control the center with your pawns as well as your minor pieces, your knights and your bishops right away. Develop your pieces. Again, the knights and bishops come out first because those are the ones that help you castle, and castle your king. So 1, control the center. 2, develop your pieces quickly. 3, castle your king. So we're doing all those things here. Of course, it's going to be a contest, right? Both people are fighting for the center. That's really what it is. Don't expect that you're just going to blow your opponent off the board every time. It's a struggle, so embrace that struggle. Knight goes to f6, just like a debate. You're not going to, well, it depends who you're debating against, but I don't think you're really going to just win a debate immediately. It's back and forth. It's a nuanced thing, and I think chess helps a lot with that. So knight f6, e5. Okay, so that was the mistake, the opening mistake. That was a bit premature. Well, the thing is, since black has this control of d4, it makes it so you can never really play d4 and guard e5. You're going to have to do f4. That's going to have to be the follow-up. But notice that, okay, he does knight g4, but notice that black can pretty easily contest that pawn on e5 with the simple move d6. He has to do it quickly, though. Again, you got to watch out. In some of the games I'm going to show you, some of these master games, the knight comes in. I mean, it seems like you can ward it off, but if you're able to really open that up, so you have the queen and knight duo aiming at d6, that could be nasty. That could be a very nasty position that white can get there. So knight g4. So it looks like that pawn's about to fall, so you have to play f4 if you don't want to lose it. And now d6 was played. And as you can see, this analysis bar, so this is about around the red is approximately equal, and then elite chess or a stockfish on elite chess thinks after d6, suddenly white's the evaluation goes up, and white's doing well, about half a pawn up, see plus 0.6 evaluation. So the way that it evaluates in pawns, but it could be just a positional evaluation of some abstract factors that it's been programmed to analyze. So it says it's worth approximately, now it says plus 0.7. So suddenly this doesn't work out as well. But if d5, so here's the possibility. If d5, pawn h3, kicking away the knight, knight h6, G4. So yeah, we're opening up the king, and I was mentioning, be careful about pawn advances. But of course, the rules are meant to be broken. So you say don't try to push your pawns in front of your king. But in this circumstance, it works out. Well, first of all, the knight can't get into the center that way. It would be very annoying if the knight came to f5. Now you've stopped it. Restriction is important, and the knight's in the way. So one of the main ways Black would like to exploit a move like this is to play h5. But the knight's in the way, so the rook's not going to get into the action anytime soon. And meanwhile, the black king is still uncastled. A lot of classic games have been won because of an uncastled king. The art of attacking chess, that's one, I think that's the second chapter. One of the first chapters is attacking the uncastled king, and then it gets into all the different ways you can attack the castled king. But watch out for that uncastled king. So knight g4, f4, d6. Okay. Oh, and let me finish that line. Sorry. So after g4, bishop e7, then we have d3. So it's just a possibility. Again, d4 is not that tempting. Because you go d4, you're losing your center pawn for a pawn that's not quite in the center on c5. And white's going to lose some control of the dark squares. Because that bishop is ready, after an exchange of pawns, that bishop's ready to come in and take advantage of that diagonal, which has been exposed because of the push of all pawns. So if you can imagine something like this, takes, knight takes, and then the bishop can come into, or not to mention actually, you can just take here, and then queen takes. Oh, that's a nice exploitation. We got a pin. The queen is pinned down. It's pinned down to the king. So if the queen moves, the king will be taken. So you can see that the bishop really exploits those weak dark squares. So this pawn moved, and this pawn moved. So there you see those glaring weaknesses. Now this theoretically could be covered by a pawn, but that's nowhere to be seen. It can't be done because the knight's in the way. And besides, first you have to deal with the bishop that's attacking your queen, and there's no defense to that. So that's, I think the computer was actually recommending, instead of taking back, knight b5. So first that preparatory move, hop in there, and then try to take back. But as you can see, the computer says it's minus 0.3. But of course, we have to test it out, and we have to use our own logic, our own positional understanding. We can't just take the computer's word for it, but it can help us. It can definitely assist us in seeing things that we may have overlooked. Give us some creative ideas to use, like AlphaZero. There's some really creative things. I really recommend you watch that match between AlphaZero and Stockfish that we're using here in December, I think it was, of 2017. Really cool match. Just complete disregard for material, which is very rare to see with computers. It's like I think of it like a romantic era chess player of the 1800s combined with the power of a computer, which was awesome to see. Okay, so we have, let's go back to the main line. So knight goes to g4, f4, d6. So again, d5 was a better choice. And pawn h3, kick the knight away, and then he goes d4. Seems like a good move actually at this point. Seems like it worked out because you do have to develop at some point. I mean, you could go d3, but then the e5, that e5 pawn is going to be falling, and the computer likes knight f5. That seems natural too. Knight's coming in again, reinforcing control of d4. What if you just take it so we can test things out? So if you take it, oh, now it's kind of an unexpected move. Now suddenly the computer is saying g4. And then you could kind of test it out just to see what happens. So if the pawn takes, the bishop takes. So white has given up a pawn. It's given up 2 pawns for 1. And it seems like there's some compensation, but maybe not. Maybe it liked something about it at the beginning, but now it turns out that black is pretty stable here and should be doing fine. So for example, if the knight tries to hop in, okay, just castle. And black's up a pawn. So but you see, like here it says minus 0.4. So if it's minus 0.1, minus 1, it would evaluate that black is up an entire pawn. Meaning that if it's minus 0.6, for example, that means that that other half a pawn is going to be white's compensation for the pawn. So it doesn't think that black is just up a clean pawn, but it's getting close to it. Okay. So I'm still getting used to this lead chess format. I usually use, I have Arena. It's like another, I think, open source. It's a free computing software, chess computer program, and then I downloaded Komodo. So I used Komodo with that. But this seems to be a little better for streaming or for recording. So I'll just try this out. Okay, so we have, right, so he played h3, knight goes back to h6, and then he goes d4. So he's trying to deal with the e5 pawn this way. Now actually, rather than d4 or d3, it seems that this was really interesting, going for g4. So for example, if white goes g4, again, the idea of giving up a pawn and restricting that knight on h6. So if we go g4, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Now remember, that king is in the center. So there's various lines here where white might sacrifice, but he's tearing open lines. He's trying to get to the black king here and trying to activate his pieces, as well as, I think, to exploit that knight on h6. Now we can see that bishop coming out to attack the knight soon. So queen d7, let's say, and then d4. This gets interesting. So he's giving up the pawn here. Knight comes in. So now we have this pressure immediately on this knight on h6. Let's say castles queenside, for example, just a sample line I did. And then bishop goes to g5, rapidly developing, bishop e7. Can trade bishops. And then that knight gets in. So that's interesting how the bishop g5, provoking the bishop trade, weakens that critical dark square on d6. So this pawn is really, latching on to the dark squares, and that knight's just ready to hop in. So the bishop is the defender of the dark squares. So by trading it off, it actually helps us to attack. That often happens, the weak dark square complex. So as you can see, there's a V right here. If you get rid of that bishop, well, now it's ours to come in. And the rook may have to actually, looks like that's the best move, the rook may have to sacrifice itself for the knight. That's 5 points for 3, losing 2 points. Because the rook is a more powerful piece than the knight. But of course, they say a knight on the 6th rank is about as powerful as a rook. I like to think of it as an octopus. I think that's how it's been described. It's like an octopus having 8 tentacles that can all reach into the opponent's position, the 8 different directions the knight can move. So after knight d6, this is a nice line. King b8. Now knight takes d4. Just clean up, pick up that pawn. And okay, let's say the knight takes back. We take on b7. It looks a little risky because the rook is, on the same line as the queen. But for the time being, that rook is also, it's not letting me make an arrow. Okay, there it is. Delayed arrow. So knight is hitting the rook. So yeah, there's a discovered attack on the queen. For example, this is a discovered attack. Well, that doesn't work because the queen just takes it. There's nowhere safe for the knight to go. Anywhere else the knight goes, you just take this. So that means that we have to deal with that. Like the rook can go here. Okay, just come back. Landing on that promised land, the d6 square. That's a nice outpost. Call that an advanced support point or an outpost. So this is positional chess. Getting your knights on good squares, for example, first creating the weaknesses and then exploiting the weaknesses by infiltrating like that. And as Fisher said, tactics flow from a superior position. So we get a superior position with the knight on d6 and good things happen, right? So this is just an example of what can happen, not necessarily best defense by black, but just playing practical moves can quickly get in big trouble. And oh wait, look at that. The knight's actually trapped because that pawn on g4, so it helped, even though it was theoretically a weakening move, but it depends on the situation, depends on the circumstances. In this case, it was good. It keeps those knights at bay. Both are restricted. This knight can't go back to c6 anymore. There's that bishop working nicely on the long diagonal. Can't even go to b5 because the knight takes. So this is looking really bad. The rook is going to have to sacrifice. Yeah, the rook's going to have to take. And now, well, look at that. Lee Chess is saying, or the Stockfish on Lee Chess is saying rook takes d6 is +5 for white. As if white is up the strength of the rook. So after queen takes d6, you play c3. And is there no safe way? Is there no way to save the knight? What if you go knight b5 guarding the queen? Oh, then you really exploit that diagonal. See, the computer, of course, sees it right away. But yeah, we should see that too immediately. I mean, when you have a bishop like that, uncontested, weak squares, pawn pushed. If the pawn were back on b7, all you have to do is guard b7, and you should be okay. But now that it pushed to b6, you got to guard b7 and a8. So if your queen goes here, you're getting in. There's no stopping that infiltration, decisive infiltration. So that looks good. So you can just see what this is a sample line after bishop g5. And also, what if knight g8? So for example, after knight e4, the main idea was just, okay, throw this, you say why d4? Well, you're trying to throw this pawn out of the way so the bishop can attack the knight on h6. And when the pawn takes, now you just hop in with the knight. And again, that d6 square. So it's sort of this, you're playing really, this is tempo play, quick, one move after the next move, after the next move, just quickly hopping in, grabbing that initiative, the control of the game before the king. This is my dog right here, you can see him, cool dog right here. And let's see, after knight here, castle queenside, bishop g5, and but the thing is, if the knight goes to g8, trying to escape possibly getting taken on h6, now you're undeveloping a piece going back. That can't work out too well. So let's just say white defends the pawn. That's a strong point right there on e5. We call that overprotection. I think it was Nimzovich's idea for my system. Overprotection. It's actually, he uses the example of a pawn on e5. I think it might be a French defense where that pawn is anchored in on, supported on d5 by the pawn on d4 in that case. But here it's only by a bishop. But we want to really overprotect it as much as we can. Maybe there's a knight, maybe there's a rook. Protect that strong point, because that strong point is going to help us infiltrate again, for example, like that. Or if this move is ever played, like in the Spassky game, we're going to see on f6. So this is an example. So after bishop f4, Stockfish likes f6. It's like, well, I want to get rid of your pawn. It's this annoying pawn on e5. It's a thorn in my side. Let me just kick it out. Let's trade it off, liquidate that center. And besides, black has actually a pretty massive center. If you can get rid of that, you can just imagine black's pawns could start taking over the board. I mean, black's going to have some weaknesses now. You can see the line to the king is open. If the king castles queenside, it's pretty open. Look at all those open squares, not covered by pawns. Over here, yeah, it's a little open too, but you can see white's way ahead in development. Look at all these pieces that white has out. And castled. Black only has 3 pieces out. Oop, just 3 pieces out here. And this pawn might become vulnerable too. So, for example, just take it. And after here, okay, well, the computer's saying a3. I don't know about that. Seems a bit awkward. That's what we'd call a computer move for sure. But after knight takes, it's just to evaluate the position. I don't know. It seems like black is okay here. Black is doing okay. Again, there's some weaknesses. I mean, the pawn that's pushed to d4 created a weakness here. So the knight's already occupying it. Yeah, the bishop's aiming in here, so kind of intimidating the king from castling this way, kind of making him. But I think what will happen is the bishop can just come out. So maybe even just bishop e7, and the black king castles, and look at that. The rook's already got a nice home on f8. Now that he played f6, he's got an open file to use to contest this rook here. So yeah, black should be fine there, and black's up a pawn. We got 2, 4, 6 for 5. So up a pawn, but white has some compensation. Again, that's why the computer here says minus 0.6. So I think, yeah, our evaluations, I think I agree with its evaluation in terms of there's compensation for the pawn. Okay. So, but again, we need to have that qualitative analysis. We can't just be like, oh, and this is the line the computer gives, therefore that's what we should do. No, you need to justify it. And you have to justify it by understanding positional concepts, analyzing games and so forth, seeing how grandmasters play. Okay, so that was the knight g8 line, and then we have if castle queenside, the bishop g5 line, and if bishop e7, then we have the control of d6. That's just an example of the kinds of things that we can achieve here. Okay, so d4. So we looked at d4, we looked at d3, and we looked at g4. So what was played in the game, it seems that g4 was a very interesting try. Really just restricting those knights and playing for to sacrifice, not really worrying about that pawn. Oh, by the way, there's a pin. Again, the strength of this bishop. So oftentimes what happens is one player will fianchetto here, and the opponent will fianchetto to oppose it, but then they might end up with some pins. So it's kind of a contest. Which fianchettoed bishop is the best? It has actually happened in the Alpha Zero match all the time. Alpha Zero was playing against the Queen's Indian, was playing D4 and C4. Black was playing the Queen's Indian. So here Stockfish was playing the Queen's Indian. And Alpha Zero kept sacrificing a pawn, throwing away that D5 pawn. And then the knight on F3 would just move and unleash that bishop. So in that case, it was Alpha Zero's bishop on G2 in the Queen's Indian setup that was really winning out for white there. So definitely, again, recommend those matches. Check it out. It's really amazing what Alpha Zero did against Stockfish. But we still have faith in Stockfish. It can still provide good things. I like Komodo also. So D4 was played. D5. So again, the move that Leisha, the move that Stockfish likes. So it's interesting. We almost have a French defense now. So it's sort of transposed. Again, like I talked about in the last game that we looked at, Neil Bruce's game, where you have to understand the pawn structure, because openings, you can play various openings, but certain pawn structures arise a lot. I mean, you even have in the Caro-Kann, a lot of times you have same structure, but usually the bishop would be outside the pawn chain. Here it's trapped behind the pawns, but that bishop might go to A6. So which will become, like we call it, a good French. If you could achieve this solid setup of the pawn chain, use C5 to attack the D4 pawn, and there's no available C3 to defend D4. And yeah, it's very interesting. So D5 was played. Now it blunts the bishop. This bishop is, we call it, biting on granite. The B7 bishop bites on granite. Well, once the knight moves. But I do like that bishop A6 idea. It's going to be hard to stop that. Queen D3 looks a bit awkward to control the diagonal. So after G4, pawn takes pawn, knight B5. Okay. So again, I think he was worried about this with that inadequately defended knight in the dark squares. Same idea. So again, you have to be really careful. Always double check what your opponent can do in response. Think like you're your opponent. You really have to think in your opponent's shoes. And now you can see there's that evaluation just going down here for white and now completely winning for black, because of course the queen is going to be lost for the piece. So that's not good. Okay. So that's why he goes knight B5 after pawn takes pawn. But he did do G4, which is what the computer recommended earlier. Again, that restricted move. And not only does it restrict the knight, which looks silly on H6, it prepares for F5. You have to play in the direction in which your pawns are aiming. So you see, this is the general direction. Especially if you played C3, you can see that. You'd really see that pawn chain. But here the pawn chain is not quite as clear. But you can see that white sort of still has this wedge in black's position, that annoying E5 pawn, which doesn't always work out. Again, sometimes it leads to weaknesses for white, and black, of course, strikes back against it from the head and the base of the pawn chain. But that F5 move, if you can get that F5 move, again, an Alpha Zero match, awesome breakthrough like that, and you can just tear open the line for the F file. Maybe you can thrust your pawn forward to F6. Or maybe you could just chill there, just hang out on F5 and say, hey, look at my dominating pawns. Now the house is very big, right? It's a very big fortress, or its kingdom is huge, which can be a double-edged sword. But you're going for the gusto, right? If you go all out, sometimes you got to try it. It's a risk. You got to risk, as my coach growing up, Vruzhin Jacobian, would say, you got to risk if you want to drink champagne. So, let's see, so after G4. Takes, knight B5. So that was a wise move. That was defensive calculation, awareness, piece awareness. We have awareness of your own vulnerabilities. Like if you're going to play a move like F4, you better know that you open your diagonal. So play accordingly, right? You got to be careful. So knight B5 was a good move. Bishop comes to C5 anyway. So now he could have taken. Look at that. Actually, Lee Chess, I keep on saying Stockfish, because Stockfish can be used on any site. So Stockfish, you could download it as well, I think. So Stockfish, it likes just taking. Yeah, why not? Just take it. That's a common idea. You blockade the D5 pawn then. So you see, if you don't take it, you always have to worry about that pawn shoving forward, unleashing the bishop. So that's why he moves the king. This might have been a little too preventive, a little too defensive, giving in to the opponent. So you got to find that balance. You got to understand their threats, but of course you're always fighting for the initiative. So a move like King H1, and look at that, just one little move. See the evaluation change so much. Suddenly it's black who's up 1.4 pawns, center pawn valuation, whatever they call it, whereas now white's up a pawn if he just, or a pawn in value, if he just goes ahead and takes on d4. It's just a very comfortable position for white, and now that f5 push is coming. It's really dangerous. Let's just do it. Okay, I like to do sample variation. We test it out. So let's say let's say black castles. I'm curious about this. How are we going to break through here? It looks like the computer is favoring c3. It's a nice solid move. See, sometimes before you attack, we call this a prophylactic move, similar to his king h1. So I can't fault you, Edward. I can't fault you for going king h1. I mean, that was nice. You wanted to get your king out of the way. It just turned out that it didn't quite work out here. I'm not sure what the time control was, but in a blitz game or something, it's good and make a safe prophylactic move. But this is more direct. You just take on d4. You can anchor in the knight with c3, lock in that square. And then, yeah, if you really want to, you can go ahead and play king h1. That would really be a prophylactic move. Prophylactic moves are often when there's no clear threat in sight. There's not necessarily an immediate threat, but you're taking these preventive measures. Because a lot of times, if you don't make a prophylactic move and you leave your king a little, dangling out there, then maybe they'll get this nice attack. Sorry, you'll get a nice attack on them, but then it'll backfire because they get some awesome counter sacrifice or something. And you would have wished you had played that king h1 move before you launch your attack. So prophylactic moves are actually pre-attacking moves. It's like in Art of Attack in Chess. Vukovic talks about the preconditions for attack. So maybe one of those preconditions is to make sure that your king is not going to be attacked, in addition to, of course, bringing your forces where they need to go, getting the right pawn structure you need, and so forth. Deeply understanding the needs of the position, and restricting your opponent. Okay, so what are we looking at? Castles. So, okay, yeah, I like that. Bishop e3, just a suggestion from the computer. Another one was, remember, c3. I mean, if you're looking at bishop e3 or c3, of course, you should go with the developing move. The bishop's going to be it's floating out there on e3. But can the opponent exploit it? Not after queen d2. You secure it. And again, get your king out of the way. Maybe bring your rook to e1 or d1. Maybe e1. I kind of like that. I like the look of the rooks behind the two pawns, especially if you're looking for some action on the f file, and prepare for that. So that seems like a pretty good way to play. So after, let's say bishop e3. Now it's saying c3. Okay, let's try bishop e3. Queen d7. Yeah, it likes c3 a lot. I don't disagree. It's good to lie. So again, that prophylactic move. Okay, so let's say black goes f5. Maybe f6. f5 is interesting. Trying to blockade the pawns. Art of defense in chess. Soltis talks about that a lot. One of the ways you can stop, let's say, a pawn phalanx, like a pawn storm from coming at you, is just stop. You have to blockade those pawns. So yeah, if you push, for example, that might be tempting for some. But then you just you close up all the lines. You see, now it says white's slightly better. It's hard for a computer often to understand close positions. They're getting better at it, but yeah, that's not much for white there, because it's important to know that in these types of positions, if the pawns ever push, you just move your knight out of the way. If he ever gets here, you just lock it like that. If he ever gets here, you just lock it like that. So unless the knight's there, of course, well, then you might even sacrifice the pawn because you forced it. It's a bayonet attack. You force it open. Again, yeah, Art of Attack in Chess talks about bayonet attacks, thrusting those pawns forward on the G file or the B file, especially if there's a knight or a pawn that can be like this. Oftentimes you can hit that pawn and knight on f6 simultaneously. So yeah, don't do G5, but yeah, take on Bassan. That looks good. So just open up the lines. Now you can see that actually it's black now who has some weaknesses, like particularly the e6 pawn. That looks like a nice target. We want targets. So Jeremy Silman has written about, I like his writing a lot. He talks about target awareness, I think is the phrase he used. Have that target awareness. Always know where your opponent's target is. So after rook takes f6, queen d2. That looks good. Bishop takes d4. I don't know why you'd give up the bishop. Doesn't seem natural. I think that white would be happy there because then white would have an uncontested dark squared bishop. But Komodo is saying that he thinks that's the best move for black. What if you just play something else? See, that's where I'm not going to listen to the computer. I'm going to say, no, that looks silly. Just maybe double. Let's. Oh, well, there's a. Now, why doesn't? All right, we have to look at this. Why doesn't G5 work? What would happen if G5? Knight can go to F5. Knight takes. And then rook takes. Interesting. So you have a fork. So you're forking these two pieces. But the knight escapes. And when the knight takes it, the rook takes back. Now, if you take the rook, well, then he just takes your dark square bishop. Now it's black who has the uncontested dark square bishop. And black is getting a fork. So he kind of gave white a taste of his own medicine there. And now it's his black's up a pawn's worth. That's nice. Yeah, that's a nice combination. I was just looking at it, I was like, wait, what? You should always ask yourself, like, wait, does it work? Test it out. And yeah, a lot of times I like to, especially when I was getting back into chess, I said, I'm not even going to use a computer at all. When you have it in front of you, it becomes tempting to look at it for everything. But as we saw, it's interesting to test it out for that. But I think if we don't use the computer, if we just press that button, we could find things like that too. You say, play it out. So you go G5, knight F, and then you say, well, what if knight F5? That is a hard move to see though. But you notice that it's attacking the bishop. And then you say, okay, if knight takes, then rook just takes, not bishop takes. Because then the knight would just escape. Because that wouldn't be good. Okay. So yeah, now we're gonna leave Stockfish alone now. We'll just look at the line. So King H1, knight takes G4, and this is actually where it gets tactical too, but we'll check it out. So knight takes G4. This is where Edward actually gets into some trouble. So that was an interesting move. So after knight takes G4, knight E takes D4. I think that was actually a good response to it. Well, what would have happened if the pawn had taken? If the pawn had taken, then, okay, now again, we're not using the computer, so we got to find this. Looks like we have queen H4 check. Queen H4 check. King goes to G1. And my fiance just got back. So what did that sound? So king goes to G1. Push. That's going to be dangerous. Yeah, it looks like we have a discovered check, and we're attacking the knight on E2. That's pretty bad. Yeah, and the rook's going to have to go to F2, and then the bishop can take. Yeah. So he goes here, which seems like a good response to it. Knight takes back. And again, that knight on D4 is blockading the pawn. Those bishops are real dangerous, but this one's being held off, and this one right here is being blockaded. So, but still, it looks pretty dangerous, and black just picked up that pawn on G4. So it turned out that the G4 move actually worked against Edward in this case. So it's, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You make a choice to go G4, you're going all out, you're trying to go for the win, but at the same time, sometimes it can backfire, so you have to be careful. And yeah, I'm sure he realizes now where this happened. Yep. And that's why it was such a huge shift in evaluation, going King H1 to simply the knight takes. And now, of course, this move doesn't work anymore because we have a solid blockade. There's no more pawn push. But in this line, after knight takes G4, and if we were to take back, yeah, then we just get that check coming. So that's why it's so important. That's just a case in point. You can see why it's so important to stop that push of the pawn. So knight takes G4. Knight E takes D4. Okay, trying to make the best of a difficult situation. Well, it turns out that he won this game. So he was in trouble, but he fought on and he won. It takes, knight takes, knight takes. Okay, and then knight just goes back. Says, all right, cool. I just picked up a pawn. We got 3, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So black's doing pretty well here. 7 pawns to 6 pawns. The king still needs to castle at some point. Although sometimes in closed positions you can get away with not castling. And where is that knight headed? Finally tries to get in the game. Well, the knight, hey, it was sitting on h6, but it got to do something good. Hey, at the same time, hey, who knows? Maybe this will backfire. The g file is going to open up. You can use the you have a half open g file. You can use to pressure the g6 pawn, maybe provoke it to push. And again, every pawn move leads to what? Potential weaknesses. Leaves weaknesses in its wake. I always like to think of it like that, just as a reminder. So knight h6. Hey, f5 happens anyway. The knight would have liked to maybe blockade that. But that's the push that needs to happen. So it actually turns out that this may not be so terrible for white. At least he creates complications. If you're the one, it's a good rule of thumb to follow that's useful. If you're the one who's ahead, like let's say you're up a pawn or a knight, then you should try to keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible, and we literally simplify. Maybe that's where it comes from. Just trade down, liquidate the position, and then you're left with your main advantages. You're left with your extra knight. Now, don't trade all the pawns, though, because if you're just left with a knight and a king, that's called insufficient checkmating material. You got to have some pawns left. So that's the converse. Actually, would be if you have more. If you're a piece up, don't trade pawns. If you're a piece down, you do want to trade all the pawns up. Try to get to that drawn position, and then yeah, just trade off all the pieces and win with the extra knight. And then with that extra knight, think about in an endgame that you have a knight and a king against a king. Pick off all their pawns or as many as you need to get a queen, and game over. Or you could just simply overpower them if you have like a bunch of pieces around the king. Okay, you have an extra player. It's like a power play in hockey. So knight h6, f5. So this is definitely a good practical move, creating complications, and you can see that annoying bishop takes h6 idea, really fragmenting the pawn structure. That could happen. So after f5, bishop takes d4, bishop takes h6. Oh, now it just gets insane. It's hard to calculate everything here. But we have we have bishop takes h6, and I think this could be considered a desperado, actually similar to the last game. It was actually kind of a Zwischenzug in between move, but it's sort of a mix. So you're already going to lose a piece, you throw it away, but it's an in-between move before you capture another piece. That's the Zwischenzug. Yeah, this looks like a desperado. It's hard to define. It's more like you're saving the piece, because desperado is where you actually lose. You're going to lose it anyway, so you throw it away. I think the last game was the knight takes f7 line, where you know you're going to lose a piece, you throw it away, and then you pick up something else maybe, or you get some attack or something. So bishop takes the pawn. Makes sense, taking a central pawn. Oh, actually, so there's an improvement. Instead of taking the pawn, his opponent, I think William, he could have gone bishop takes b2. Because taking on e5, well, here's the reason. If you take on e5, does that help your king, who's centralized on e8? No, it's kind of like in the previous game, again, the Roy Lopez. So you see the same themes. Last game was a Roy Lopez. This game is Closed Sicilian. But some of the same themes keep cropping up. So now we see this idea of you're taking the pawn on the e file, but you're actually leading to more danger, similar to taking the g pawn might, in some situations, lead to more danger. A lot of times, hey, just sack a pawn to open lines. Very typical attacking method. So you're helping your opponent attack. So bishop takes e5, suddenly you see the evaluation here was marked at plus 1.9, changing from after f5 minus 1.3. So white was worse, but hey, creating complications worked. So taking on d4, that wasn't a good move. He should have gone knight takes f5. Yeah, knight takes f5, knight takes f5, e takes f5, queen d3, for example, castles. Then we're going to get the pawn back. Rook takes f5, but black should be doing fine. If rook takes f5, castles, queen f3, queen d7, just getting the piece out, and then d4 comes. Now white has to trade down if you take. So if you take, you're actually losing the rook for the bishop, losing the exchange. And if queen g4, okay, just trade down and queen d5 check. This looks pretty good for black. So yeah, that definitely would have been a huge improvement to go knight takes f5. Wait. Instead of bishop d4, sorry. Instead of bishop takes d4, knight takes f5. Yeah, you got to get rid of that pawn. That's a nasty pawn right there on f5. I mean, and that's a terrible knight on h6. So why don't we get rid of the nasty pawn with the terrible knight? Seems like a Good combination. So knight takes d4, knight h6, f5. Yeah, I like that move a lot. Great move. There were a lot of really accurate moves that Edward made here. So he might have made like one mistake earlier on. He misplayed the game. I think that it was the premature e5 push. But after that, I mean, he's a good tactician. What did he say? He's an attacking player. So now he's in his element. He gets to play what he wants, like Simon Williams, right? Moving Harry the H pawn down the board. Homage to Simon Williams. So bishop takes d4. Bishop takes h6. Bishop takes e5. Okay, so again, that was the mistake. And the bishop should have taken on b2, not helping your opponent by opening up the e file. As we're going to see in the game, is going to get crushed. So, but still, f takes e6. Now taking on 8. It's hard to calculate. There's so many possibilities here. But now you grab the bishop on h6. So now, temporarily, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces against 4 pieces. Black is up a piece, but here it's just crazy. Okay, here's another sample line. Rook takes. Nice move. Well, now this is hanging on b7, but this is also hanging on a1. But does that really matter? No, it's like in the Immortal game where Anderson in 1851 in London. Awesome game. So Anderson just keeps on giving away pieces. Go ahead, take my rook, take my other rook, take my bishop, oh, and take my queen. Let me checkmate you. So that's the downfall of materialism. Sometimes being greedy, like in Wall Street. Sometimes greed is good if you can win, but a lot of times greed will just, excessive greed is going to backfire. So how about just take what you need, right? How about that? Just take a pawn, hold on to your pawn, but don't make unnecessary concessions. You can take it safely. Maybe you need to throw it back. Okay, no problem. Don't be too greedy. It'll get you in trouble. Rook takes f7, queen g5, c4. Okay, this is getting crazy. So c4. Well, we're attacking the pawn, which is pinned. So I don't think black really wants to take it, even though he's threatening checkmate with the bishop open. But now, of course, white is going to be the one to take advantage of that diagonal first. So again, that opposition between the bishop, not to mention you can just take with the rook. So after c4, yeah, wait, hold on a second. Yeah, this is getting insane. Queen g5. Wait, what if he just took this way? If you just took, so no lead chess to help us out anymore, right? What do you think? Yeah, feel free to comment below with any ideas you have. Okay, well, obviously the main move would be let's grab the rook. Let's see what happens if we take the rook. I think it's justified to even just be down, if nothing else, just to be down the exchange. Not to mention, oh, I'm liking this. Queen takes d5. That looks awful. Yeah, the queen's coming to d7. That's going to be checkmate. Okay, natural move would be rook. The queen check doesn't do anything. If you check, the king just moves. Okay, you can do it. You can throw away your bishop. I don't think it's enough. Okay, queen can go to c6. So if we look at this, queen c6 check. Ooh, now we got a nice check on f7. Oh, king g8. Is it enough? May not be enough. And now black is threatening a counterattack. So maybe we didn't need to do queen takes two. I might have missed something there, but what if you let's just entertain this idea. Let's just take it back. So we're just down the exchange. Everything else is equal down the exchange. This is collapsing. That's pretty dangerous. I do have a feeling though there's something there. After, oh, we have a bishop. Let's not forget about the bishop. I think we can use it somehow. Rook d8. What am I missing here? There's got to be got to scan the board, find some way. Look at, remember, when you're looking at tactics, everything's connected. Look at the whole board. But I'm just not seeing a way to crash on the dark squares. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there it is. That's it. Does it work? It might. We can do a check. King moves. Well, we can just do e7 check. Oh, that's what I wasn't looking at. So it doesn't really matter where we check. Yeah, we don't need rook. I was too hasty. Rook f7 check. Okay, it doesn't work, but we need to look at every branch in the calculation tree. So, for example, there might be two branches, queen c6 and queen b7. They may not make a difference here. Only difference is that maybe you by going here. Sorry, queen b5 and queen c6. Only difference is that the bishop opens up on the diagonal if you go to b5. but you may not need it here. But if you go, for example, let's just say you go, also for defensive purposes, they might make a difference. Let's just say you do queen c6. That seems decisive. Yeah, it's got to be. It's e7 check. That's the move. So it's not a checkmate, but it's terrible. Yeah. The attack should be decisive. The queen probably has to give herself up. You obviously, can you go here? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to work. Well, we might as well, that looks nice. Let's take that with a queen or get a rook. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Because he has to take. Otherwise it's checkmate. That looks tempting. Here, oh, it's mate in 2, even quicker. Queen check, and that's a mate. So yeah, that's the key, the e7 check. But first you prepare for it. So you lure the king to f8. We call that, I think that's called, would be considered attraction. Usually more when you pull the king somewhere that you want to checkmate him. But it's kind of what you're doing. You're luring the king to f8, attracting him to go to that square. And then no, not rook f7. That didn't work. We tested it, but we can cross it off the list. Basically, I think of it like process of elimination. Look at your candidate moves. You have your candidate moves every single move along the calculation tree. So in this case, our candidate moves were rook f7 and e7 check. And we looked at both. Rook f7 didn't work. Cross it off. e7 check looks great. It's basically going to lead to mate in a couple moves. So that's the move that we're going to do. And of course, you double check and do it. Okay, so this is some convoluted line that we were looking at. Let's go back. So yeah, but we were just looking at alternatives that you could have done. But after bishop takes here. Oh, I think this was the bishop takes b2 line. And we still found a win for white there. But that would have been better. Again, this is a bit suicidal. Taking on e5. You just opening up your own e-file. Maybe, I don't know what he thought. Maybe he was thinking that this counterattack potential. So let's say you go back, you set up a battery. I like to think of it like a rocket. You got like your rocket boosters behind your queen. It's good for kids to explain it that way. You got this rocket shooting down the diagonal, and yeah, that could be dangerous. But again, it's not quick enough because you got this here. So after bishop takes e5, takes on e6, just tearing it open. Queen h4, and that was another mistake. So maybe now it says +5 for white, like upper equivalent of being upper rook, but it's because of the attack. It's not because of material, I think. The evaluation is because of the strong attack, probably leading to mate, or because later on the attack is so strong that you have to cede a rook. Something like that. That's in the way the computer. Who knows exactly how it, except for the software developers, and the computer's probably beyond them by the time it puts the algorithm into it. So castles, rook takes f7. So, but this is a little more tenable. Maybe this would have been the best chance to try to hold on. Castles, rook takes f7, queen c8. Okay, defending the bishop, reasonable enough. Queen d3. That's tricky because you can't take the bishop since the rook would be looking here, supporting the queen. That would become our focal point. Right now, this is kind of our focal point on g7, but if you take here, suddenly your new focal point is h7, which is going to be a mate. So I'll show you that just in case. That's not fun. So rook takes f7, takes, check, king takes, and this is nice. Okay, so material, we're about at parity now. We have 3, 4, 5. Okay, white's down a pawn. Pick up that pawn with an attack, though. Really, again, the pawn doesn't matter here. It's about the king safety. One of the most important imbalances of chess, as Jeremy Silman talks about in How to Reassess Your Chess in the workbook. I definitely recommend it. Queen takes h7. Bishop f6. Just trying to solidify, block the f file. And then we have this cool move, bishop takes g7. Now this doesn't work. This is crushing. Rook f1 check. That's just over. Because now if the king moves anywhere, the king is just stranded. Is there an immediate? I don't know if there's an immediate mate, but basically you restored material equilibrium. Actually, you're up a pawn. At least we can just take this and have a crushing attack. There's probably something even better than that after king e6. We might have, well, we can keep on checking him, and then take with check. That's a good start because he can't block since the queen will just take. with the rook. Yes, that's going to be bad. So queen h4. Yes, that was really the critical mistake for black. At least he could have tried to fight on, and white would have had, again, when we look at computer analysis, we have to be practical. I mean, it's not like our opponent's going to find all the computer moves. So let's play the one that's least bad, right? At least he gives us some way of trying to hold on. I think I just said bad with a Midwestern accent. I've been in a few different parts of the country, so maybe you noticed that. Pick up a few different types of accents. So queen h4, queen e2, queen g3. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's now we see that's really what he was trying to do. That was his whole point of taking on e5, going for the counter. And he's like, hey, maybe I'll win. But okay, you got to learn that with your king on e8 and the position tearing open, it's not going to work. It's over. Queen b5 check, forced win. King moves. What if you went the other way? Let's see. Let's do some more tactics. So why don't you pause it if you want? You can try to solve this yourself. Well, okay, this is one of those critical positions. So you're about to get mated. You're about to get mated on h2, so you better find a win. Where is that win? Queen d7. See that pawn? He never bothered taking that pawn back on e6. So I'll take checkmate. That looks good. We checkmate first. You're not allowed to checkmate them after they've already checkmated you. Got to surrender. So king f8. Okay, obviously. No. Oh yeah, this is he played this, but of course just take with check. This is a funky move. So what I say to myself, it became really helpful for me to avoid making weird moves, is if you're going to make a weird move, you have to prove that it's better than the blitz move. So what's the blitz move? Of course, just take it with check. If you don't calculate anything, you're just going to take the pawn with check if you have like 5 seconds left on your clock. So if you can't prove that this move is better than the move you make with 5 seconds on your clock, then you got to make that move. So you hold yourself to that standard. No, this move probably, this is winning too. This is completely winning. Oh wait, no, look, it says it's plus 1.3. So the evaluation went from plus 7.5 to plus 1.3. That's a huge swing. So suddenly it's going closer to equal. It's like being down a pawn. So yeah, I mean, of course, if you take on f7 instead of bishop f4. Oh no, actually, oh, even better. No, it was queen b4 check. I think rook takes f7 looks pretty good too. No. Sorry, yeah, rook takes f7 doesn't work because it looks like the king can just go here to g8. Maybe okay, I'm not going to use stockfish, but maybe black wins this because now that mate threat is there, and no more. I'm not sure bishop f4 is as good anymore, or even it gives you a +1. Now it's minus something probably. Okay, so the king actually finds a little refuge on g8 in that line, but after bishop f4, here's the problem. Takes rook. Now this is less forcing. You should look at the more forcing lines. So the more forcing line is actually the one that wins on the spot. Instead of bishop f4 is queen b4 check. Bishop blocks. Then you take. Then you sack your queen. This is cool. Very nice line. Sack. Takes on g7. And I thought maybe rook f1 check, but actually you just take your material. And in this case, okay, this is the case where you're not greedy, but you're just like, hey, enough. That's all I need. I have what I need. I have an extra bishop. 3, 4, 5 pawns against 4 pawns. Okay, so technically you're up 4 points, 3 points for a bishop, or 3 pawns for bishops. It's like being up the value of 4 pawns. That looks good. And rook takes f7 check, king g8. Yeah, but bishop f4. Where are we? Oh, in this line. Oh, that was the one. Definitely don't want to do it there. But bishop f4, it's just less forcing. You always want to look for forcing moves. This is not a forcing move. This is a threat. So the hierarchy goes, obviously, checkmate to the top. And you have capture check. Capture something with check because you're likely to tear something open simultaneously. Capture check, regular check, and then capture, and then threat, and then quiet move. That's kind of the way I like to think of the hierarchy. Quiet move, good. So it helps me with solving tactics. Pretty much always going to be a check when you're solving tactics. Almost, especially if you're like up to 1800 level, 2000 tactics, pretty much always it's going to be a check or a capture. So that should be your default. So bishop f4 is a threat. That's lower down the hierarchy. It's not that forcing. I could ignore you if I want, right? But if you check, I have to respond to you. So bishop f4 takes. So again, it's not that forcing. We're threatening to take on f7. So queen takes. But here's this idea, which is a cool idea. Then you got rook f1. And now we have this skewer, essentially, a skewer through the queen to the pawn, because the queen has to move out of the way, and then the rook's coming in, and then you have the devastating attack in here, it looks like. Yeah, okay, oh, he picks up a piece. So he ends up being a piece up. But wait, I wonder if black just doesn't take the rook. See, it's not forcing. Black has options. What's the material count? We got 4 pieces against 4 pieces. And remember I said you could just cancel out. You can go queen for queen, rook for rook. Well, that's not much of a rook. I like to think of a rook like that as being, double parked, like it's stuck on the 4 floors down in a garage and like got a huge pile up, and that's not getting out anytime soon. And then you have 2 rooks in the corners and bishop. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 3. So yeah, theoretically, black's up 1 pawn right now, but the material, obviously the king is a lot less safe. Here, white's king is still, even though he lost the g pawn, but he still has, this acts like a pawn. That's one of the things you can repair in an art of defense in chess. We call it repairing weakness. So you can use the bishop as a pawn to repair a weakness. Because if you move it away, then that king is more exposed. But yeah, so what if we just do like here and simply don't take the rook, don't get greedy, and just defend our king, trying to get checkmated. Then what does white do? I mean, it still looks good for white. Oh, okay. You're going to get mated on f7, looks like. Just hang the rook, go queen f4, and there's an unstoppable mate. Oh, no. My bad. Queen is way back. But he still ends up a piece. So it's not that different from the game, really. But that pawn is to sit there on e6 is pretty nasty. Let's see. Oh, there might be, I feel like there's something else here. Let's keep, you can't stop looking. Got to keep on looking for new things. So after you, oh, wait a second. So, let's see. So if f6, there might be some pushes at some point. But yeah, queen d7 looks pretty strong. So you have to go queen g6. Ah, that's the win. So they do have queen g6, but we got to look 1 move deeper. That's it. Rook g4. Now the queen is overloaded. Can't stop all the threats. Now we have 2 focal points. We got a focal point here. That's trying to mate there. Trying to mate here. Well, for example, if the queen, maybe I'm missing things, but if the queen goes here, that's a mate. And we have to look at all the options. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. Queen here. No, this is bad. This is bad. Okay, now we can, it's not a mate right now, but I'm sure it'll be a mate soon. And we're picking up the rook with check. That's game over. Here. That queen is so pesky right there. Nature could stop it. But okay, we can. That's good enough for me. Queen takes. Then we have again a skewer. Oh, well, it's protected. Yeah, I'm missing stuff. All right, but yeah, we take this. King goes up. Yeah, if it's undefended, it would be a skewer, but the bishop's protecting. Yeah, it's just up a rook, and the king is, subjected to this onslaught by all these pieces. So that's pretty bad. That's a winning position. So if f6, queen d7 still wins. Okay. Fortunately, we can't. I don't think we can use our bishop right now. But our bishop it just acts as more of a defensive piece, and if it needs to, at some point, maybe it can take there at some point. But here we have enough. These 3 pieces are all we need for the mating attack in this case. Okay, so rook takes f4, queen takes f4, rook f1, queen d6. Okay, now we get our pawn on f7, king goes to g8, and then he's just up a piece. So, oh, I'm sorry, wait, 1, 2. I'm tired. I'm missing stuff. See, it looks like he's up a piece. Yeah, that rook on h8. The rook on h8 is a little hidden there. So after h5 tries to get out. But yeah, the attack is just so strong here. I mean, now we have 3, 4, 5 pawns for 5 pawns. Yeah, so actually we're down the exchange. So we have, again, now we have rook for rook, queen for queen. Ooh, yeah, okay, now it's going down. Okay, we have rook for rook, queen for queen. Bishop for rook. Yeah. So again, the bishop for rook, that's theoretically 5 points for 3 points. But white has a bunch of pawns. So we have to look at things in context. Not to mention the pawns end up balancing it out. We have 3, 4, 5 against 4. So there's super pawn on e6, pass pawn, about to get a queen, threatening a discovered check. So yeah, if you look at it in context, white is winning. And it's going to be very hard to defend this attack. Now you notice again, we're talking about the light squares to the dark squares. Because of this bishop, finally the bishop comes to life. And now, yeah, the light squares are just completely under white's control in this position. So after h5, bishop takes d5, king h7. And then he finds, the king tries to get out of the way, but he finds queen d3 check. That's a good move. King goes to h6, and another good move. See, he sees the tactics. He's seeing all the tactics. Just got to make sure you understand this opening, Edward. Once you get this opening down, you'll be unstoppable. Now, you might even want to play the open Sicilian. I mean, if you want to go for the kill right away, you might want to do open Sicilian, so you get positioned like opposite side castling and against the dragon. I mean, it's double-edged sword. Depends on your style, really, because you can get, yeah, obviously you can get attacks in the closed Sicilian too. It's just going to be a little less book. You're getting out of the book of it, which is interesting. Okay, so check, because if you play the open Sicilian, you pretty much have to memorize a lot of lines. It just kind of comes with the territory. It's the opposite of chess 960, where you just play chess, random 960 combinations of positions, shuffle up the back rank. So king h6, queen d2 check, and that does it. That's a nice move, because if he goes g5, if the king moves to the light squares anywhere, now we get, you see it? See how the queen is X-raying through the bishop, looking at the queen? So all you got to do is move the bishop. Fortunately, we have a forcing move, moving the bishop with a check, and then we get the queen. So after bishop e4 check, takes, game over, and mate in a few moves. So queen d2 check. Okay, that can't be good. So again, we have it's sheltering the king from this angle. Not that. That's not an angle. Not in chess, unless it's like a super knight or something. From this angle and from this angle, but you're not sheltering the king from this angle or from. So he's able to actually get into h8, as you'll see. So we find a way in. You gotta just keep attacking. Think about the geometry of the chessboard, coming in from all angles. Utilize your pieces to the max. Maximize your pieces, as IMD Move Runner said. Queen f6 check, rook g6, queen takes mate. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. That was forced. So I'm sure he anticipated when he went to queen d4, he was probably planning that out. Well, obviously we're going for the mate first immediately on g7. But yeah, there's just no defense. Okay, you can take on d5 and postpone your fate for a couple moves. But after this, check, blocks, take. So basically we have a suffocation. The rook comes here, suffocating, creating a mating net. Now remember, mating nets are also based on your opponent's pieces. So when the pieces are like this, all you need is a queen check, and that's mate. Nice finish. So yeah, Edward, I think after you had that little mess up in the opening, well, okay, we just saw that move. Maybe not this move. You didn't need that. You could have just gone, not rook takes, I think it was queen b4 check here. Yeah. You could have done that. So you missed one tactic, one big one. But other than that, you played really well with the tactics. I really like that idea f5 too. You found that that's the thematic idea in the structure, which became essentially a French defense, really. So we can talk about this like a French. Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of similarities across openings because it's about the pawn structure. So King's Indian. There's a famous Fischer game, King's Indian. I mean, of course, many others too, where he King's Indian attack, he pushes to e5. But see, the difference is I don't think he got his pawn to d4. Maybe it was on d3 or something. But he overprotected that e5 pawn, I'm pretty sure, in that game. And he ended up getting this nasty attack, awesome attack. I think it's the one where Chess Games, I really enjoy chessgames.com. I think it calls it A Night in Tunisia. Yeah, that's the one. It's called The Night. See, it's so memorable, right? I can't forget it. A Night in Tunisia, I guess it's played in Tunisia, and an amazing knight just comes in. They come up with good puns. I think they vote on the puns or like readers recommend it. You got some really advanced players, like probably a lot of correspondence players, it seems like, on chessgames.com. So that's not good. I mean, I think it's an older interface, but I like it. It's classic, and it's got a lot of good discussion. It does like bios of the players, coverage of the matches. Like I would really recommend look at the World Championship matches, or like for example with another thing you can do, another thing that I do myself. like with the Closed Sicilian. So I would recommend looking on chessgames.com. I did that here, I think. Chessgames.com collection. And that's where I came across this Boris Spassky versus Ostel. So it's Ostel La Vista, baby. So there you go. There's a pun of the day. That was just in 2017. So see, they're kind of recapturing these games. It wasn't that long ago. It was 1990. It was close. It was around the time when Boris Spassky did the rematch against Fischer. I don't know, was that 92? And then Fischer crushed him nice. Again, a lot of nice Roy Lopez games in that one. But yeah, so I found this game from a collection. I just Googled Spassky. I didn't Google Spassky. I Googled something like, let's find out what I Googled. Closed Sicilian Games Collection. And then I got this popped up. So we get Spassky Closed Sicilian Collection. And I looked down and I said, oh, look at that. White plays knight g2. So there's some really, really helpful people that put this stuff together. It's like for the love of chess, some open source stuff, a lot of really good stuff, really good stuff you can use out there to learn openings. Now, so just if you look at this page, Google or Spassky Closed Sicilian Collection. Oh, there's again knight g2. I didn't even look at that one yet, but there's another one down here. White plays knight g2, knight d5, and overtakes. So we get a little preview. Oh, that's cool. He overtakes the f6 square. So let's check this out. And this will give us a better idea of how we can play the Closed Sicilian from one of the greatest chess players of all time. That was the end of that reign of Soviet players, like a bunch of Soviet players in a row. Alekhine, Botvinnik, they're called the Botvinnik school. He was one of the main leaders of the Soviet school. So interesting. I want to study more about that. But they had this dominance in the 20th century. And then Fischer came along and beat Spassky. But Spassky is a great player. So very strong, very tactical too. Yeah, I mean, he was, like any world champion, you have to be well-rounded. But they tend to have their strengths. But he was definitely an attacking player. So knight c3, whereas, for example, Petrosian, more positional. Tal is obviously attacking. Capablanca far more positional, loved endgames. So knight c6, g3. So there we go. This g3 structure. Now again, it's flexible. So we can play for this knight ge2 stuff and d4. But when black goes bishop g7, black is really getting control of that d4 square. So after d3, d6. Then we have, so don't want to lose all that recording. Knight ge2, e5. So this is, again, it's a slightly weakening move because that pawn went from e7 to e5. Knight's coming in, of course, to d5 right away. He doesn't even wait. He just comes straight into d5. Now, that's why I like to play e6 myself and allow the knight to go to e7. A little more, a little quieter. But e5 has its point. You can play f5. I mean, black is going on the offensive, and black gets that nice grip on d4. Well, you're definitely not playing d4 anytime soon here. And I think there's another game where white still makes it happen, like plays c3 and then d4. But let's flip through this game. This is cool. So we get the weakness. Again, white has the white square control. Light square's under his control. This reinforces that, and it allows us to play f4. So similar whether we're playing, as I was mentioning before, the King's Indian attack, or if you're playing, which can sort of become like a French defense, or if you're playing the Closed Sicilian, or if you're playing against the French defense. A lot of times you get very similar structures once those pawns start advancing. Once you get that pawn to e5. Knight d5, not here. This is cool. And that's why I think he wanted knight d5, because Spassky is very perceptive, and he saw that weakness on f6. So he says, all right, after you go there, bam, bishop g5. Now I'm already beginning to exploit your weak square. This is nice. Castle, no, he didn't castle, h6. Okay, let's come in further. Of course, I'm not going to take your knight. We're gonna occupy the weak square. I want that for my knight. Huh. Now, why didn't he castle? Maybe he was afraid of being attacked. I don't know. It seems strange. Maybe he thought he would dislodge the knight, and it didn't work. That knight was a monster. So if the knight takes check, yeah, he thought, okay, I'm just going to go to g7. I'm going to fill in where the fianchetto. I'm going to fianchetto my king. Castle by hand. A little loose. It's a little loose. Because if the bishop's gone, you weaken your dark square complex. Once you play g6, you weaken the squares. Bishops can at least fill it in. After king g7, okay, he just comes back. But he's coming back with a vengeance. as you will see. Oh yeah, he tucks back again. I've seen Carlsen do this kind of stuff all the time. He'll just like maneuver his knight to you know, a3 to c2 to e3 or something. Then he'll come back to d5. Again, like the last game, like Neil Bruce's game, that d5 square is weak. So, but he doesn't. The thing is, like, he doesn't want to let a pawn fill it just yet. Sometimes you can, but he'd rather have a piece filled. So let's be patient. Let's go back. Queen go. Oh no, he wants to do the same thing. Maybe trade off the light squared bishop. Pawn f4. So he goes for the attack. I think he's going to castle queenside, if I recall. But he wants this in quick. Look at that massive center. Maybe black shouldn't have taken, because essentially when you take it, you're trading your e pawn for the b pawn, for the g pawn. And now white has 3 in the center, and black has 1 here and 1 kind of off here. Black is still, you know, fighting for the control of the dark squares, but now white has the light squares and contesting the dark squares, and maybe can ram those pawns forward after you castle. So okay, so black blockades the pawn. He tries to stop it in its tracks, but with the weakness. This is important. Remember, I keep on talking about pawn structure, the importance of the decisions you make with your pawns. So when you play f5, you're weakening g6. That's going to come back and bite him. The knight on e7 guards it, but maybe we trade off that knight. Maybe that's part of the reason we go knight d5, removing the defender. You see, we can already see possible combinations just based on the weakness. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we can see some scenarios on that g6 pawn. Watch what happens. So Spassky's like, let me get to that pawn as quickly as I can. Queen d2, castle. Remember, as Stillman said, weakness, I think he said weakness awareness, something like that. Target awareness. Basically, target is your weakness or a focal point that you're gonna just harp on it. Just keep hitting away at that. Okay, so rook b8, that's natural. Usually you want to throw your b pawn at him. When you have this kind of, the pawns are aiming this way, obviously he's anticipating that white is going to castle queen. So unfortunately his attack is too slow. White already has that, remember, the half open g file idea, right? Let's get on it. Okay, so what? Move the knight. Oh, so he actually is able to ignore. He's fighting for the initiative. Usually you want to, when your opponent threatens you, you want to, you know, protect it. But here he was careful. He made sure that's stronger. Well, the thing is, if you take it, the queen takes back with a check, and then you pick up the bishop, which would be pretty bad. Yeah, everything's opening. Knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes. That's interesting. Why does he want to take the knight on c6 with his bishop? It's not for a positional reason. Remember, tactics flow from the superior position. So first he has his positional advantage. You have all these weak squares. Now come the tactics. Get rid of the knight. Aha. Knight comes in. We have attack. We have a combination coming, which his opponent missed. Remember that g6? Remember that g6 right there. Now what would happen if bishop took? Does he do? He didn't do it. If bishop takes, well, first of all, you can take the knight with check, and it's pinned. But wait, this is even better. After here, now he's ready for this. This is a pretty nice finish. Again, yeah, Spassky was an awesome tactician. I love that game where I think he like pushes his H pawn somehow. He like sacks. There's this sacrifice. I think it might have been a King's Gambit or something. But there's this really famous game where I think it's with the H pawn, where the H pawn is gets in here, and so he breaks in through the king side. Sacrifices a bunch of stuff. So rook takes, king takes. Now you can see this setup with the knight attacking potentially the king and queen, forking. So we just take this. So even if the bishop takes or the queen takes, it's a fork. If the king takes this one, it's a fork. So you can't do anything about it. So you sack the rook, but you win the knight, and now you're threatening a fork. So what does he do? He goes back, and then he just comes in. Okay, so now we have 4 pieces for 4 pieces, but remember we have that imbalance, knight versus rook. But a lot of times you can give up the rook for the knight if you're going to get something in compensation. In this case, black's king is completely exposed. We have 4, 6 against 4 against 3, 4, 5. So basically it's only down a point, but small price to pay to get this nasty attack on the king. Knights are infiltrating, and I can imagine the queen's coming soon, which he does. Finds the geometry on the chessboard. Queen g2. Look at that geometry. So we're working the power of the queen on the diagonal in this way. Now look at this, the way he maneuvers. That board vision. seeing across the board after rook g8. Bam, now he goes to e4. Suddenly he shifts the pressure on the e file. And I mean, he could have again. He's not greedy. He could have taken that. He doesn't need that. Actually, then he would have had to worry about his knight after the rook takes back. But even if he didn't lose anything, you know, even if he could have just taken it, he wants the attack. It's for position, not for material. Hey, when the time comes after the attack, if you can cash in and get a clearly winning endgame with an extra exchange or a knight up, okay, go for it, or even a pawn. But earlier on, we want the attack. If we can get a checkmate, we'll take it. So now he goes rook e1, and that looks devastating. What can he even do here? What if he takes? Queen f5. He can't go here. He has to walk into the line of fire. And then look at this. We do a nice. It kind of reminds me of that trap in the again in the Russian variation, actually in the Petrov, where the knight wins the queen in that line. Here, the knight does better. It helps win the king, or maybe you'll win the queen actually here. But we almost got the king here because you got this. Well, he either throws his bishop away, or he can, let's say he blocks. But now I think you may have something else. You may have a check. No, but you just take and you win the queen. Takes, takes, takes. And now if he wants to take this, he's losing the bishop. Bishop can't do anything. So now we have a queen. We have a knight for bishop equal. So what's left? Queen for rook. So up 5 points there and extra pawns. So let's say he, I don't know, let's say he runs. Okay, well now we can, whatever. I mean, everything is winning. We can just escape with the knight. And then now we're looking, that's our focal point. We're trying to checkmate. Or just win more pawns and push. But we'll probably checkmate with the knight and the queen. A great combination. So that was a Spassky game. Now let me show you how I do it on chess.com to find a game. So this is, for example, this was a Paulsen game. This is the Paulsen variation of the Sicilians. This was, when was it? This was back in 1873 in Austria, Vienna. So let me just show you, okay, this is a game I found, but let me show you, for example, how to find a game. So we go to chess.com. And let's see. So we will go to play, and I have the, since I'm a titled player with the National Master, I worked for the International Candidate Master. They gave me the Diamond membership, which is a cool incentive to get it. And then, you know, they bring more, and it's good for them because they bring more titled players to their site. They have a lot of grandmasters, and they have their titled Tuesdays and stuff, drawing more people. So you get full access to the Opening Explorer. I'm not sure. I think maybe it doesn't give you all the master games or something if you don't have the access. But again, there's free resources out there. So it's master. So I have it filtered for master games. Or you can even do it for your own games. Or you can, let's say for another player, let's say you know someone's, you're going to play against somebody. Let's say they don't have they're not in the database for, you know, for big tournaments. But maybe you can just look them up on chess.com, and you can find them. Maybe wherever you can find their games, you can at least prepare for them a little bit before the match. So we're doing master games. So let's say, okay, in this line, we do e4, and it tells us the percentages. So c5, this is a little early to know the percentage, but after, well, we probably know we don't want to do like some really bad move, like, I guess f5 doesn't work out so well. That's, that gives, in practice, well, f6 was worse. F6 was 86% for white, so that would be 14% for black. So you don't want to do a move like that. But we're going to see the percentages are more relevant later on. So e4, sometimes they kind of shift around. I'm not sure how good it is. E4, c5, but you get a rough idea. You can ballpark it, whether you want to play it or not. And you can evaluate it yourself with a computer or somebody else. So e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, g3. Okay, I think it's g3 right away. Let's see, is that the common move? Yeah, g3 is the second most common move. Also, knight f3. I think d3 is common too. I did pretty well for black, so 42%. Knight f3 is obviously the most common. That's natural. Probably some weird stuff. Yeah, like g4 right away. You can go for a quick attack if you like to move your g pawn. Bishop b5 actually did pretty well. So if we're doing this type of g3, it looks like we can do it right away. But then you might figure out later, oh, I'd rather do something else first because it does better. But g3 should be fine. So after g3, we have various options. g6 is actually, that's what I would probably play, g6, playing like a reversed English. Let's see. Oh, rook b8 is interesting. So rook b actually did pretty well. Got 49% for black and only 30% for white and 20% draws. So rook b8, they're going straight for an attack. So you're not likely to see that. Yeah, after g6 and bishop g7, it does well for black. It's pretty common, but probably not that quick. Probably you'll see g6. But what about the e6 stuff? That's what we were looking at, right? So e6, bishop g2, natural follow-up. Now they can even do this and transpose, and they can end up playing g6 later on, or just go straight for the d5, trying to gain control, because white has 1, 2, 3 on d5. Once black plays d5, if he does it right away, is that even a possibility? No, because I mean you're only going to have 1, 2 defending it. I don't think anyone wanted to. Oh wait, what if you just has this happened? You can look at see like whether weird moves about. Actually, there was one game in France, it looks like, or a French player, Perez, lost that game with white. But anyway, for the most part, I think you probably want to prepare more before pushing in the center. You could look into that game if you want. But maybe knight g7 is interesting there, but probably a more typical move. Yeah, they could do g6 right away. Or a simple knight f6. Let's look at that, for example. But sometimes you're like, I'm not even sure all these moves. I don't even know what I want to do. I'm just going to view all games from the current position. And then I'm going to filter it. And I'm just going to get some model games from some really strong players. And again, I'm just going to, there might be various ways they play it. But I just want to see if there's a certain way some of the top players are using it. If they win, especially with it. So we have Andrakin. Is it Dimitri or something? Andrakin versus Potkin. So we can click on that game. That's the highest rated player at the time who did it. So he's a 2700, it's like a super GM, 27, 2800 level. Regular GM is like 2500 or something. They drop below that. But you have to have a 2500 FIDE, World Chess Federation rating, plus your 3 GM norms. So info, was it Dimitri? It doesn't say, it says D. We can look him up, Andrakin. So, and then you have the game. So you just flip through the game. This was a slightly different opening, I think, right? With knight f6. And then you see how he wins. He has knight g2, and he opted for d3. So he's playing classical closed Sicilian. h3, rook b8. Get that b5, b4 idea. It's like, I think, especially with the dragon, think of like the dragon's long tail after b5, b4. Really securing control of the dark squares. But even if you don't play the dragon, even without bishop g7, rook b8, b5 idea is very interesting. But yeah, he goes for the f4 idea. So you can see this type of thing come up a lot. And actually, okay, now we have we have similar to a King's Indian attack without d4. There's a pure French, we have d4. So it's kind of like a King's Indian attack. Usually, maybe the knight would have moved from f3 to e1 or something, but similar structure. And then the g4 move, so he's going all out. Ah, that's nice. Knight goes behind, supporting a potential f5. Maybe he stacks e5. Who knows? Let's see what he does. Maybe that knight drops on h5 and makes g7 his focal point. b4, knight in, e5. Ah, interesting. So we can see a new idea. There's so many ways to win. So every time you see, but you want to learn the main ways to win in the opening you play. Master that opening. When you play that opening, it'll really help your performance. So if you always play the dragon and you really know the dragon, you really know the Closed Sicilian, you don't need to. Yeah, a book is good, but if you just study a bunch of, maybe if Andrakin plays it all the time, just study all of Andrakin's games. Maybe Carlsen played it. You'll see who else. One of the strong. Well, it wasn't Carlsen because he wasn't listed there, but because unless he was lower ranked at the time that he played it. Oh, that's interesting. So g5, knight comes in. Well, he doubles his pawns. He opens up a half-open c file now. b3, locking up the queen side. But c2 is a weakness. You have to be careful. Let's just flip through it and see what he does. Yep, knight h5. Okay, he wants to take the d4 pawn if you'll give it to me. Triples up. He wants c2 instead. He says, you take d4, I'll take c2. He says, nope, I still want d4, but you're not getting c2. He says, okay, fine, I'll defend it. Bishop h3. Okay, are we looking at f5 now? Okay, he just chops it off. He's all right, you want to give me a pawn? It's a double pawn, but I'll take it. Rook sacrifices itself for the bishop. He doesn't take that one. He ignores it. He says, what are you doing? Just blocking my bishop? Fine. f5. So now we see he did hang that e5 pawn. But to smash open it's always the typical structure like this. You want to smash it open. F5 takes, bishop takes, hitting the knight. So that fork on G6 would be bad. You just take the knight. Okay, he takes on E5. Oh, this can't end well. Okay, now he takes the rook. What do we have here? I don't know. I feel like there's some dangerous things on the king side. Queen hits the knight. There's just a lot of looseness over here. The bishop is loose. The knight's loose. So he moves the bishop and defends the knight. Reasonable defense. And then he gets his rook on that file. He secures it more while adding more pressure to C2. That's black's target. Black is really just going for that C2 pawn, whereas white's target is on the E file, the F file, maybe the H7 pawn, maybe the G7 pawn. We have a lot of pieces. Aha! Knight F6 check. Nice move, looks like. So if you take it, if you don't take it, he's going to take on D5 and fork the king and queen. If you do take it, which you have to, now you open up the king and you get a nice splinter. You get that nice wedge on F6, or the thorn, whatever you want to call it. Oh, nice. So once he has the bishop, once he has the pawn there, it's kind of like a version of the classic bishop sac. You did the bishop sacrifice. Usually it's followed by like a knight check or something, but here, if the king were to take, then the queen's coming in with a check, it looks like. And then king G8. I can't make the moves on this one, but if he took, yeah, queen H5 check should be decisive. We could even, after king G8, we might even be able to take on E5. Because if you go queen H6, he goes bishop F8. Oh, then you have rook G2. Yeah, the rook G2. The rook coming on the G file combined with the queen. Yeah, so queen check, king G8, queen H6, bishop F8, and then the rook check. Yeah, stuff like that is going to be decisive. So he's losing after three moves. So king F8, he can't take the bishop, it's taboo. Queen comes in anyway. Bishop E6, bishop F5, ouch. And now is there anything you can do? He's threatening mate on H8. Of course, the king has to run. But if the king runs to E8, you just take the bishop on E6, and it's pinned. There's that pin. Okay, so bishop F5 actually wins the bishop for free, and then you're up a full rook, because white's, that's the thing about, if you win a piece and you're already up the exchange, you have a rook for a knight, but then once you take that bishop, you're up a full rook. Game over. So that's an example of how we can do it. Now, what else do we have here? I found some other games. I found a game by, I was doing this on Lee Chess. Was that a good one? I don't think that was the best, but just to show you the opening. That's interesting. The knight. Oh, this was interesting. So the knight, just a different try for black. Now this was using Lee Chess's opening explorer, similar to chess.com. So and again, this is free. This is open source. So Lee Chess is a great resource. So if you don't have the full access to chess.com, use this until you get your title. And then if you feel like using chess.com, you could do that too. Knight d4, or you can go win the arena, or whatever you call it. You can win the arena here. You can win the title Tuesday on chess.com. So knight to castle, using all your good openings and other skills you learn from the GMs. So knight d4, castle. Okay, so basically black is playing that. He's really playing for those dark squares, just reinforcing his grip on d4. That's an interesting way to play. Now what happens in this game? So d3, this is the classical setup. d3, e4, and bishop g2 to play the closed Sicilian. So again, you don't need to push your pawn to e5. You don't need it. You don't need this. You don't need that stuff. Maybe later on, once you're ready for it. But just do bishop e3. This is the main setup. And if the knight's on f6, sometimes you can go h3 first. Sometimes you can play the h3 pawn first in order to allow the bishop to not get bothered by the knight coming to g4. Okay, so you have this. Knight goes to f4. This was kind of a weird game. Yeah. So he weakens some queenside dark squares, but he's trying to not let the queen take. Then he brings the bishop back. Yeah, this looks kind of bad for black, because now the knight's threatening to move, attacking the queen with the bishop, discovered attack. So queen retreats. I'm not sure. I don't like that queen on a6. It's out of play. Anytime you see a queen on the queen side way out there, and if there's a king side attack, especially, that queen could get off sides. Oh, this was weird. So he goes back to b1 because he wants to play c3. It's a typical idea, though. It's just this game itself was a bit weird, but it was interesting ideas. So then he goes h4. Okay, maybe he's stopping g5, gaining space on the queen side. If you play g5, you can take it, keep that knight in f4. Then he kicks the knight. So that c3 idea is very typical in the Closed Sicilian. And now at some point you might play d4. He doesn't. And it goes back to c1. So he retreats everything. It's a semi closed position. That's so it's not. You have some time to maneuver. Black still hasn't fully developed. It looks a bit weird, but look what he does. So he takes g5. Okay, then he hits him with d4 right away. So it gets crazy now. Takes back. Knight takes, queen takes. Okay, he gets. Oh, now he's going for that diagonal. So temporarily, white's up a piece though. So white has some liberty. Queen d1. Yeah, he should have just gone queen c3. Queen c3, and then after knight g4, you go. It gets tactical. Then you go queen f3. But now the knight's falling. So if you take, queen takes, and then g5 is under attack. And now I think white got 2 pieces for rook with an attack. So this is really good. And black is, the bishop needs to come out. White hasn't developed on the queen side, but he has a knight, a queen, a bishop. This bishop has long distance powers, so it can on the diagonal here. So yeah, the attack is very dangerous. White should be winning that. Well, the computer thinks +4, +5 almost. Okay, so queen d1. That doesn't seem like a little too passive. Takes. Now he gets his e5 in. Okay, see, a lot of times they do end up playing e5 once they're ready. Bishop g, but now the computer thinks it may be slightly better for white. Okay, interesting move. Bishop a3, attack the rook. Knight takes, get the exchange back. Get that rook. Let's see what's the piece count. We have 2 rooks against a rook. So we have rook for rook, queen for queen, knight for knight, bishop for bishop, and we have a rook for a bishop. So white's at the exchange. Black has 5 pawns. White has 5 pawns. So white should be close to winning. Up the exchange, and the black king might be attacked also. White's king is a bit more snug here. Rook comes out, and knight finally gets in the game. This is interesting. He lets him take. He doesn't, but he can get the exchange back. But if he does, he weakens his dark squares. See, that bishop leaves. King tries to hide, but it looks a little dangerous. So, I mean, look. This guy's blocking the garage, right? Rook needs to get out of the garage. Or I think I'm like being on the bench. They're all sitting on the bench. They need to get in the field and play. Get off that bench. So knight goes to g6. Bishop e4. Knight e7. Bishop e3. And threatening a discovered attack on the queen. It doesn't do much yet, but now we are hitting the queen. Look at that centralization. Defending the knight while invading. I don't know about that. Well, I guess you have to. You have to stop f7. No other choice, huh? If you go here, you just get taken by the knight. Yeah, so you might lose this, but what's with the check? You can sack something here, maybe. I mean, this king is very under a lot of pressure. So bishop takes, rook takes, knight here, back. Okay. It's looking pretty dangerous. We're up the exchange. We have an attack. Yeah, there's pawns, but you can see, I remember in a cool Karpov game. I think it was a Karpov game in the in an open Sicilian where he or maybe it was, but where he ends up taking. No, it's like a pawn took this way or something, and he gets his rooks on the open lines, half open files. Even though the pawns are there, it's kind of like, think of them like X-rays. The pieces still have influence. Let's see what happens here. He doesn't want to trade queens. He wants to keep attacking. Maybe black has drawing chances in the endgame because he has 2 pawns for a rook. It's actually equilibrium in terms of the material. But now he's got to stop this rook g8, winning the queen for the rook. Pin. Knight comes back, covering. Okay. We're bringing a second rook in. That's overwhelming. Oop, now we're hitting f7. King tries to run, but you can't defend f7 then. Okay, see now that he pushes, so we found a way to invade. 2 pieces on the 7th, cutting across. Very dangerous. Hit the queen. Second rook comes, invading more. Ouch. Classic. 3 rooks on the 7th, overwhelming the defense on the knight. 3 attackers, 2 defenders. We thought we just pick it up because you can't, if rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, check. So if knight moves, that's over. Check. I'm sure there's a mate soon. It's a forced mate, right? Check. If he goes this way, we go here. It's like a spin. It's a slight variation on a certain theme with the 2 rooks, where you get him in the corner. Check. check. If he goes this way, same idea. We just get to pick up a bishop for fun along the way. And, we have a check. Oh, now, can we use that diagonal? Don't forget to go backwards. Oh, this is cool. Check. Knight blocks. But now the knight stopped. The knight is not defending there. Look at that geometry. Use the geometry of your queen. Then the queen has to block. Mate. Okay, see, now I'm getting warmed up on the tactics. It's a little sloppy earlier, but without my... Yeah, okay, I found a couple things without lead chess, right? Can't be... See, that's what happens. Can't become dependent on that thing. All right, that's what... Let me just flip through one more. I think we had... Now, this was interesting, because I think this is the one, yeah, where white opted for an open game. And like I said, I think that's why that might be the best choice. Well, that was B. Okay, transposes. But the B6 stuff, like happened in the game. This is like exactly like the game. Now then D4. So I think if they play, especially with B6, slows black down a little bit slower to move. Well, otherwise they would move the D pawn, but it seems a bit slow. I don't know. So castles. So they didn't play D5. So we hit them with D4. Now again, when they play E6 and they play C5, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but that's a pawn weakness. Two pawns apart, you move both, you create weaknesses. This cannot be defended. This one can be. If you went here, now that's the weakness, like we saw in that other game, in the Spassky game. So after D4, now it's transposing to sort of, no, not quite, but it's like an open Sicilian, but maybe this one benefits white, because I'm not sure if an open Sicilian you want that B6 stuff. That's why nobody really plays B6, Bishop B7 on the top level in the open Sicilian. So maybe we've suddenly transposed into favorable variation. So maybe if they play B6, then you use the flexible knight GE2. And actually, hey, I'm going to play D3. I'm playing for D4 now. Okay, bishop hits the rook, bishop hits the queen. So what? You hit the bishop back. Those bishops are a bit scary, but I think we can handle them. In the meantime, though, look at this. See, we got a lot of pressure. That could be a target. And the dark squares. See, there it is. See, it's not just some moot point. I'm telling you these things because the pawn structure matters so much. That little thing about these two pawns moving and then playing D4 to open the line. Like, I've won a lot of games myself like that. I mean, just like being, target awareness. And I'm just gonna go all out against that target and have that kind of X-ray vision earlier. Have your chess X-ray vision. D4. You're seeing that the queen and other pieces want to hit D6. Look what happened if he moves later. Now we play E5. Oh, look, E5 happened there. See, that's with good timing. So E5 happened there. Bishop takes, king takes, knight G8. Oh, that's terrible. I mean, what is this? Yeah, this has got to be a lost, theoretically, a position and lost position. That was redundant, but strategically lost. King takes G2, knight G8. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? You don't want to go to D5. Just take. That's terrible. Takes. Okay, well, I mean, we have many things we can do. Actually, I like in the game, queen G4. Hitting this. Okay, you want to castle? I don't think that's going to work too well. Now we have this theme. And then you're going to get mated here, so you have to go G6. And we can just win the exchange. And then next we're going to win the pawn and double up and probably win that pawn too. Oh, not to mention you already have the queen here too. So yeah, that's over. That's going to be over soon. This is terrible too, because now the knight goes to G8, queen still goes to G4. This bishop wishes he were guarding, or the king wishes he were castled, but you can't do anything about it. So after G6, well, now look at this. This is complete dark square domination. Again, that dark square complex. Remember I mentioned earlier about the pawn going here, weakening F6? There it is. See, this is proof. I'm not just making this stuff up. Look at that dark square complex. Devastating. And you see, especially when there's rating imbalance. Oh no, but look at this. Black is a 2500. I was about to say, like, if you have a 2300 against a 2000. Always imagine, like I talked about on my blog, imagine like you're stronger than your opponent. Imagine how a 2500 would beat a 2200, for example. Because they can all be beaten. It just tells you can beat them. Of course, be careful. But have the mindset that you can beat anybody. And then combine that, yeah, with some caution too. But be ambitious. So knight b5, a6. So psychology is very important. Knight c6 check. Okay, this is great because we either block the bishop and make the king move, or we make him take, and then we infiltrate on that weak d6 square. Now look at these holes. These are called holes. I like to think of it kind of like a shish kebab. You know, you have like shish kebab with the meat on the end there. And let's see. Yeah, that definitely looks like a good place to be. So queen c7, queen f3, rook b8, bishop e3. Okay, now it's time. Yeah, you got to finish your development. Who cares about the pawn on c2? We're playing for mate. I mean, we're just getting our pieces in. f5. Okay, that weakens himself more. Remember, every time you see a pawn move, think about why it weakens him and exploit it. Queen e2. Okay, I mean, if nothing else hitting this, let's see what he has in mind. Maybe tripling on the d file. We double. We can't take the knight because this is going to hang. He blocks. Can we sack? No, just hit it. And then if the knight moves, you got that irresistible target on d7. Target awareness. Knight takes. Okay, take with the queen. No need to double the pawns. And not to mention, we're going to now, look at that. Especially this diagonal. That's very nice. Going to get in here or in here. Found an avenue in. Oh, there we go. The pawn, yeah, that would have helped his defense a little bit, but now we're really getting in more. Okay. Here. Yeah, no need to take, because then you're going to play the queen against the two rooks. We don't want that. Two rooks are better than the queen usually. So queen g5, rook f8, rook here. A lot of amateurs like to take the queen for the rooks, but the rook's usually better. So after rook f8, rook here, queen c5, queen h4, and then queen takes e5, queen takes h7. Yeah, we're just invading. Rook here, and then take. It's over. Yeah, this looks bad. 3, 6. But yeah, white is invaded now. Getting those pawns, opening up more lines, and just, you know, it's a siege on this king on e8. Take. Oh, that's nice. Rook takes e6 check. Takes. So he gives up a whole rook, but he saw this combination where even if you block it, you check him here, you take this one, and then what do we do next? This was hard to see actually. It wasn't immediately obvious. But he checked, goes back, checks him again, and then you see how he threw this in? So he threw in the queen check. He makes him go back. Now, what if he had gone this way? If he goes here, then you get hit with this rook check, and the king can't get out because the queen's covered. So that's over. But after king here, see, he threw in this nice finesse. Check first, make him go back, check again, but now it's in similar position, but the pawn's gone. Now I got rook f4 check. And that's done because, where can he go? He's going to lose his queen. So just when you have an open king and you got queens and rooks around, I mean, those are your heavy pieces, like your cannons. Got that cannon shooting down. You can't do much about it with an open king. And eventually the pieces are going to stumble over each other. Only way. And that is going to be a skewer. Another skewer like we looked at a couple today. After rook here, check. And then we're going to pick up the queen. And then we're going to have, well, hold on a second. We still have the queen against the two rooks. That's going against what I said. Oh, okay, well, this is different because we have 5 pawns against 1 pawn. I mean, all else being equal. But if we have 4 extra pawns, it's easy win. Plus, you can use those pawns to help mate the king along with the queen. That's done. But after check, he resigned. Unless I'm missing something, but I don't think there's a mate. Yeah, I don't think there's a mate here, is there? Check here. No, I don't think there's a mate. But this is done. There's too many pawns. So it's 3, 5 pawns. So he's up 4 points. He's technically down a point. It's 9 points against 10 points. But he's up 4 pawns. So it's like being up 3 points. And that's done. So yeah, I think I'd recommend Edward take a look at if they play. I mean, this was kind of a weird line they played. This is pretty rare. But if they do play something like this, consider the option of playing the open Sicilian, especially if you're like attacking positions. You're going to get a quick pressure in the center. Otherwise, check out those Boris Spassky games. Check out that game collection on the Closed Sicilian. So anything you do, I really recommend these game collections. A lot of people have put together some cool stuff. It's kind of like Quora or Reddit and stuff like that, where people share their ideas. And this is just with with a chess specialization. So you have some pretty cool opening collections. Just kind of look through, see the ideas, and if you want, you can delve into particular lines. But every time you play games, you can use this for analysis. So hopefully that was helpful. And let me know if you have any questions or any comments about any of the lines that came up. All right, have a good weekend. Thanks.